Okay, continuing on with our outstanding guest speaker, today the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab is proud to present Mr. Grant Dinh. Grant Dinh has been researching his and other families' histories for over 40 years, since he was told by a cousin that he was the 36th generation of the Gongs. His research has taken him all over California and Asia. He has worked most of his life in the nonprofit sector, including for Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, and currently consults on community fundraising, historical, and genealogical projects. Grant completed the certificate in genealogy research from the Boston University and moderates an online group on Chinese American family history research. He has spoken to organizations and libraries throughout California and loves to help others find their roots. Grant is on the slate of nominees for the Board of Directors of the California Genealogical Society at its meeting this Saturday, and was on the team of researchers for an upcoming film about the Chinese seamen who survived the Titanic called The Six. So please, let's all put our hands together and welcome Grant. Okay, Grant, I'm going to dim the lights and the class is all yours.
Thanks, Suzanne. It's kind of, this is the first webinar I've ever done, so I'm really excited to be here. Just if everyone could just hold their hands up so I know that you're hearing me. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yay. I'm really honored to be a part of this. Suzanne has created an amazing genealogical resource over in for you in Reno. I just look at the website and I'm just amazed at the programs that she's created and the weekly talks and also all the resources she has in the library. I grew up in Oakland, but recently I was in Reno a couple times. Once was passing through on my way to the 150th anniversary of the railroad completion in Utah last May, and that was a great experience. And also just before that, an event where we were able to tour some of the sites where the Chinese workers helped worked on the railroad in the Sierra, and we ended up stopping in Reno, and we took a bus to get there, and the plan was to take an Amtrak back and see the railroad up close. But naturally, knowing Amtrak, it was about a couple hours late, and then it was several hours late, and so we decided to come back on the bus, and then we heard by the end of it, it was maybe 6 hours late. So unfortunately, we didn't get a good look at the tracks that way, but we got to walk on the site that people built, the tunnels, what's called the Chinese Wall, which spanned a ravine, just amazing things. And genealogy kind of leads you that way to go out and find the actual sites where either your ancestors or other people have ventured, and it's really fun that way. I'm going to have a PowerPoint, and it has some videos in there, and I'm hoping that they work. I mean, I can see them here and I can hear them here, but when I turn them on, if there's any chance that you can't hear them, I can see you. I'll probably be able to see you in a little window, so just kind of hold your hands up if that doesn't work, and I'll try to work out something with Suzanne. How many of you have been able to do some interviews with family members or other friends of the family? I'm just curious. Oh, great. A lot of you have done that. That's fantastic. Suzanne told me that there's a relationship that the community college is developing with StoryCorps, and I think there's maybe a place you can do the interviews on campus, and that's really great. I know those are, I've heard some on NPR, and it's really, fantastic. And I also encourage you to bring in your family members to do them. I understand they're fairly short, so the interviewing I'll be talking about today generally it's a little bit more longer and more relaxed. So I'm hoping that what we create that you'll be able to do after this workshop or that you've been doing already will be helpful. I think Suzanne has my handouts. I don't know if they've gone out already, but maybe either. Oh, okay, you have them already. That's great. Thanks.
Did not have a handout? Did you not have a handout? Randall, do you have an extra one that you can
No,
get?
I don't have any
Okay. Right here. Oh, you got one? Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a comprehensive. Well, I'm trying to make it a good introduction to doing interviews, but it's got a lot of links to other sites that can help you out. And so when I set up this presentation, I've used a lot of the resources that I've been involved with at the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, and I was there for about 8 years, and we did interviews with people who came through Angel Island sometime between 1910 and 1940, and I worked with professors like Judy Young, who wrote a book about Angel Island immigration, and so most of the examples are going to be Angel Island descendants. So I figure it's a chance to also talk about that part of history as well as present some interesting interviews. I'm going to give some examples that people have created, and so I hope you'll enjoy those as well. The examples are meant to show what you can find out, but also kind of a little bit about the techniques that you can use. Generally, most of us will just create basic interviews for our own purposes. But if you decide you want to make something longer about a family member or more involved, there's some tips that you can learn too from these videos. So let's start with my presentation here. I'll share the screen and hope that I can all this up. There we go. Okay, there it is. Okay, so this is so when you're about to do an interview, of course you're not just going to walk up. Oh, you might, but you might probably be less likely to walk up to somebody and just present a microphone in front of them. Most likely you'll have spent some time talking to them ahead of time. And sometimes your subject might be a little reluctant, but often you'll say, I really would like to learn as much as I can about your life or your family's life. And so there's some excellent guides online, which I included in the handout. But set a priority list based on what you want to know, what you need to know first. If you're kind of trying to write a family history, naturally you'll think of the people who are older to talk to first. Sometimes there's issues of memory loss. They might be moving away or illness. So try to talk to them as soon as possible. And when you decide who to interview, often grandparents or people of the older generation, and they'll often have the best stories, but of course might have memory or mobility issues. And don't just go with your direct line. Find their siblings, friends, and others in their generation. Just like you do in basic genealogy, you look at the fans, the friends, associates, and neighbors of people you're trying to research, because often they'll have stories about the people you're researching. Just like when you're doing research, you will often look for the people who might have come in contact with your family or the people you're researching, because those files could lead to more information about your families. And the same is true if you're talking to your parents' generation. Ask uncles, aunts, cousins questions your parents might not know. Oops, looks like I have a... Okay, so decide what you want to find out before you start and make a list of topics. You might float the list by the subject. Sometimes they'll ask for a list of the questions. It's up to you. You might want to make them feel comfortable and say, hey, yeah, these are the things I want to talk about. You don't have to necessarily have all the areas, but all the questions, but you can have the general areas that you want to learn about. And but be prepared to go in different directions. Let's say they go off topic and they say, oh, that reminds me of this, and kind of let it go, and you might find really interesting information that you had no idea that was coming up. And just make sure you go back to your list of questions for the things that you definitely wanted to cover, to make sure that you have that information. And if they only have, let's say, a certain amount of time, be aware of that and make sure that you get the questions you want to ask answered in the time that you have. Sometimes, of course, the questions will lead to more things, and they'll say, "Oh, I could stay for another hour, or things like that," which would be really exciting if you can do that. And like I said, don't just stick with the older generation. You might have talked to younger folks who have stories that you can uh, corroborate with the older folks. This is a story about Lai King Wong. She came to through Angel Island when she was very young. I believe she was 6 or 7. Uh, she looks a little younger in this picture, so maybe about 5. And this is her picture when she came to the U.S. These are some of the documents that we were able to find for her uh, and her family from Ancestry.com. It shows that she sailed third class, and she came with her mother. And okay, so Lai King was 8, and her sister was 4, and her older sister was 11. Her mother, well, this was in sometime in the 1930s, and um, the way the immigration law worked, they were going to join Lai King's father in the U.S., and he had come over um, as the son of a native. And so you can see on the left side it says U.S. citizen. So during the Chinese Exclusion Acts, there were very limited categories that Chinese could come to the U.S. under. And this was between 1882 and 1943. And so the Chinese could come if they were, okay, laborers could not come to the U.S., but if they were a merchant or they were a traveler, a student, an educator, or a diplomat, they could come to this country. But what happened was people could also come to the U.S. if they were the children of U.S. citizens. And in 1906, when the earthquake and fire destroyed much of San Francisco, it also destroyed the birth certificates. And so a lot of Chinese who were here would go and claim that they were born here so they could have citizenship, because they were not allowed to become naturalized citizens because of the Naturalization Act of 1790. And so what would happen was that what happened in this case, Lai King's father came over and he said he was the son of a U.S. citizen, but wives of U.S. citizens could not come over from China after 1924. And so they figured out a way that they could say, oh, his wife was his sister. And so the young people had to get used to calling their mother auntie, because that was the only way they could come over. And so for several months beforehand, they started talking to their mother as auntie. And you can see in the documents at the bottom, it says the category is the name and complete address of the nearest relative and friend, and in the country from where the alien came. So they say their brother and uncle is still in Guangdong, China. And on the right side, it says, are you going to join a relative or a friend? And they mention people in Oakland that there are cousins that are joining. So Lai King has her story, and I'm going to have a little excerpt. It's just the way it was shot was just very standard. There's probably a microphone and one camera, but they have a nice intro to her story, going to Angel Island, where the story she's talking about takes place. If I'm assuming everyone can hear this, so that's good.
We see it so far, but we don't hear anything so far.
Oh, really? Okay. There's a very faint piano. Can you hear that, Suzanne? Okay, good.
So far, no audio.
Okay. Can you hear anything now?
No.
No? Okay, hold on. I'm going to pause this. Let's see. Huh. Okay, well, fortunately,
If you shoot me the URL, I'll go ahead and open it on, over here on this side.
oh, okay, great, great.
Just go ahead and email me real quickly the link.
Okay, let's hold on for a second. Sorry, everybody. This will just be another couple seconds here. Okay, maybe actually, let me see. Can you all hear it this way? Is there any sound?
No, we can hear you, but that's it.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, I'll send it over to you then. Okay, it's on its way, Suzanne.
For any minute. There, I got it. Okay.
Okay, good.
Before it would be very embarrassing. Who is that lady that came with you? And I said, it's my father's sister. Oh, all right. Are you sure? That lady is not. I put on the post. So, the 5 days that we're going, Lord, who will come home and, my home, it was very boring. Nothing. No toys, nothing, not even a little ball. But however, we were so young, not having anything. And most of us, the thing that's most important is that we have to concentrate on remembering to call mama. So we will not make a mistake in front of our people. We just pass our time by talking and gossiping a little bit about where we came from And we never felt passing the time was a problem. It was just so glad to be in there. For first, I did not tell my drive. 50 years. I would talk about it. About my own life. And people in the Chinatown, they were not talking about the life. And they were ashamed. And number two, they were rather treat Angel Island tours under the rug. Put it under the rug and forget about it.
Okay, you can stop it.
Okay. All right. All right,
Okay,
now
great. Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot, Suzanne. I sent you another one that you could um, that I'll be asking you to queue up a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay, let me see. Let me go back to this. I'll share the screen. I'll go back into PowerPoint. Okay, this one. Okay. Um, so what should you bring to the interview? Well, along with physical things, ideally research your interviewee's life as much as you can ahead of time. Um, Ideally, you'll probably know them because they're family members, but even if they are, it's great to do a little research if you can to find out things that you can ask about later, where they grew up, went to school, etc. So you have some ideas where to start. Naturally, you'll be asking them some of these questions, but if, let's say that you know they grew up a certain place, you might already be familiar with it. You could say, oh, what about this location, and so on like that. So that's always a good way to get started. Um, Photographs are really great. Photos or sketches. If you have a photo album that the family has, it could take hours, but maybe find certain ones that you're most interested in, and you could. They're often very small, so you could try to blow them up ahead of time, and present them to them and say, "Hey, it looks like you're in this picture. Who else is in here?" And then if you're doing a video interview, try to show which picture that was, so you'll know when you go back later, you'll know which picture they're referring to as far as the people in them. And then that's a really great way to get them to start talking a lot. And this picture is fun because my Uncle Jack is pictured on the right, and he's talking about that's a layout of the laundry where he grew up, and he told a story about his brother Hank, who's on the picture on the left, and he said this is kind of a famous picture in our family where Hank had broken his leg, and he the family couldn't find crutches small enough for him to help him. So his big sister, I think it was Ruby or Lucy, found these tennis rackets, and they were just the right size for him to hobble around. And the fun thing is that a photographer in Woodland, where they had their laundry, saw him and took this picture. And so it made it into the Woodland Daily Democrat, and this poor forlorn Chinese boy, and it got picked up by the wire services all over the country, and the family started getting these checks for that poor Chinese boy in Woodland who couldn't afford crutches. So that's a fun story that can come out of a photograph. Uncle Jack provided a lot more details than we had known before. the crazy thing was, I first saw this picture, I think in the 70s, and then I was at this friend's law office, the community law office, and went in to talk to him, and I look on his wall, and there's that same picture. I said, Wally, where did you get this picture? It's my uncle. And he said, oh, I got it at a garage sale in Chico. So it's like, what? How did this happen? It's totally crazy. So it made its way from Woodland to Chico, maybe, a couple hours away. It's like, but yeah, it's a really fun example of a story you can tell. Don't miss unexpected opportunities. Why is it going backwards like this? Okay. So be ready. If you go to a family gathering, you go to a holiday get together or any occasion, most people these days have smartphones. So if people start talking about the good old days or something about historical things, say, can I tape this? And they say, that's fine. Just turn on your voice recorder or shoot a video, especially if they have pictures, and that'll kind of get you started for some of the things that maybe you can go back and maybe do a little more formal interview later, or even if not, at least you have all these things that you can write down and as a starting point for more research. It's always a great thing to do. Yeah, just ask if you can record the conversation. And sometimes people have been waiting years. They've had these stories and no one's asked them, and all of a sudden they have the chance to tell them. And like I said, they can lead to more formal interviews. Sometimes it's worthwhile to interview more than one relative at a time. I had an example which we won't show because of the challenges in running the videos, but there's a new film out called The Ito Sisters, and it's done by a young woman named Antonia Glenn, and she does the story about her grandmother and her grandmother's two sisters, and they grew up in Cortland in the Central Valley in the Delta area of California. And so there's a picture on the left of them when they were younger and when they were older. But what really made the film, I thought, was that she would talk to her aunts and her grandmother, and they kind of feed off each other in terms of their memories, and that really can add a lot. It makes it difficult to transcribe sometimes because you don't know who's saying what, but a lot comes out that way, and you can really get a lot of information that way. So if you get a chance, it's still online on KCET's website. It's about three sisters who grew up, in San Francisco and in Cortland, and it uses a little bit of animation along with the interviews Antonia probably interviewed them over at least 10 years. Unfortunately, all of them are gone now, but their stories live on because she had the foresight to videotape all of them. And in the other direction, I've had some success when a few of us would get together to interview one relative, and so we'd kind of feed off each other's questions and ask more to our uncle. But yeah, just make sure you have time to listen to the answers before you cut each other off. So that's a story. We won't go to that one. During the interview, try not to interrupt when someone's thinking about things. If you ask a question and they're just thinking about it, don't jump in and say, well, what about this? Just kind of let them think about it, and ideally they'll come up with an answer. If they don't, that's okay. Often you won't have any reason to hurry up, but just kind of just relax and let them get their thoughts together. And sometimes they'll say something that's different than what someone else said, and just kind of let them tell their story and say, well, I heard from Auntie Joe that blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, no, that's not true. Or they might say, oh, well, maybe you're right. I forgot about that. And so, of course, everything that you hear as a genealogist, you want to corroborate sometime, all the time, but sometimes you don't have that opportunity. So you kind of try to confirm it other methods if you can. And sometimes if you question them, they might explain, or they'll say, oh yeah, you know what, you're right, it's not this. And yeah, like I said, you corroborate what you say. And ideally, if you can take the person to the place they're talking about. That's really nice. In the Ito sisters, they actually went back to Cortland, brought the sisters back to Cortland, and they went to where the high school was located, and they could talk about their memories on site. So if you have that, if they have the mobility and you're able to do that, that's really great. And that's a great place. If you can videotape, you can show the sites that they're talking about and things like that, if they're still around, if the sites are still around. And these are Felicia Lowe, her mother, and her daughter. Felicia's a filmmaker based in San Francisco. She could not get her mother to talk anything about her experience as an immigrant from China. No matter what, she said, Fee, it's not that important. But when her daughter, Alana, had a school project when she was a teenager, she got Alana got her grandmother to tell her all kinds of things she would never tell Felicia. So, it's not like your kids or grandkids will be like secret agents, but it's kind of like, try it, ask them to say, I'm doing this school project. What was it like, Grandma? And sometimes they might be more forthcoming. So it was amazing. Felicia saved the phone messages back in the day when there were little cassette tapes for phone messages. She had a recording on her film of her mother saying, that's not important, blah, 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 blah. And then later on, she finds the truth from Alana. So it was pretty amazing. Be prepared to be cautious with delicate subjects. Sometimes someone might have a very painful memory and you really want to know what happened back then, but it's a very delicate subject sometimes. So in those instances, kind of start with softball questions, start with easy ones, and then kind of work up to it. And if you can feel it's the right time, you might want to just say, so what happened here? And if they still don't want to talk about it, that's okay. I mean, they probably expected they would be asked about it when you said they would be interviewed. And then, kind of go around, and it might take another opportunity later. You can say, okay, well, that's okay. You don't have to talk about it now, but maybe come back later, or they might call you up and say, I kind of ready now. And so the issues can include like difficulties during immigration or loss of family members, divorce, incarceration, or mistreatment, and military service when they lose their buddies, and loss of their homes or things like that. So they can be very, very painful, but use your discretion. And I know there are things you want to find out, but sometimes indirect way can work. You use your best judgment. So this is, I'm a little bit about the physical things that you can. Here you have lighting, you have backlighting, you have side lighting, you have back in the day there were, camcorders were much bigger than they are now, but that's kind of a good placement of people within the room. But you don't need all that kind of equipment necessarily, but just be able to record what you want. But if you're trying to get something that'll be like high quality, then you might need something like that. And lighting's really important, which I'll show you in a second. You test out your equipment. Always have a backup with extra batteries, SD cards, chargers, things like that. If you bring water and Kleenex, if you might need that. Find a quiet place with decent light where you won't get phone calls. Turn off your cell phone, turn off their cell phone, and things like that. You could often use a smartphone. I mean, they're really amazing now, the quality that you get. And, if you want to have someone edit it, just ask your kids or grandkids, because they always know a lot more than we do, right? Higher quality, a DSLR camera on a tripod with good light. That all those things make a difference, but they aren't really crucial. I mean, as long as you get the words down, that's really good. But if you want to have a higher quality, then you might want to do all those things. But do keep in mind that DSLRs will only record 20 minutes at a time. A DSLR, digital single lens reflex camera. So if you're recording, ideally, if you're the interviewer, you will not have to be the recorder, because that would really disturb your flow, ask a family member if you can to do that. But just keep in mind that you will have to stop and start every 20 minutes, which is kind of a pain. And I try to do that on the fly sometimes, where I'll stop the recording for like 1 second, then you start it up again. But just practice that ahead of time so you don't have that interrupt your interview. Ideally, you want to have your interview be as seamless as possible so you don't have to stop and start. And if you're doing a video, it's great to make an audio backup. Let's say you have problems with your video. If you have your smartphone recording the audio, at least you'll have that. And that's always very helpful. Again, just like keeping your genealogical materials, always backing that up, always have a backup plan for when you're recording. And like I said, the young people are always really helpful. This is, I had a video here, but we don't have to show it, but this is interview with Herbert Yee, and you can see I was really not that knowledgeable of lighting back then. It looked fine in the camera, but when I got to the video itself, you can see there's really kind of harsh lighting because there's lighting coming in from the window on the side, and it cast the left side of his face in shadows. So that's something to try to keep in mind. Again, if you're just if you just want to keep a record of it, that's fine. But if you want to do something for bigger use, might want to get side light of an extra source of lighting. During the next video, I'll pull up some of the things that I use just to make things a little higher quality. So in Benson's interview, when he was 99, you could see it's a little hard to tell, but you could see the extra lighting from that I provided made his face look a little less washed out, even though we had lighting from the window again. And this is a video that I've sent to Suzanne. Suzanne, did you get that?
Hold on, let me switch over to the other slide here. Hold on.
Okay, but meanwhile, I'll present. We at Angel Island, we hired a filmmaker named Jeffrey G. Chan, and he interviewed a man named Eliseo Felipe when he was 99 years old, and he had come through Angel Island. When he first came to this country, he didn't have to worry because the Philippines were a U.S. territory, so he was called a U.S. national, which meant he could come and go, come to the U.S. and work. But in 1934, there was a law, I think it was called the Tidings-McDuffie Act, which said that Philippines were going to become an independent country in 1944. So in 1934, when he came back, even though the Philippines were going to become an independent country, those from the Philippines could not come back and forth as they pleased after the law passed, because they would be subjected to the quota for other Asian countries, which is very low. So Eliseo in the video is going to talk about when he came back from the Philippines. He was questioned, like, you're not supposed to be here, and then he said, "Oh, I have a job in San Francisco." So these are some of the things that we found from Ancestry, which has his draft card's transcript. It doesn't have the actual card. You have to pay more money on Fold 3 to get that, but maybe you have that at Truckee. But it gives his birthplace, which is really extensive, and draft cards have been really great sources of information sometimes for me. The Philippines and his birthday and where he lived then and when he registered for the draft and so on. And then there's also his enlistment record, which shows he enlisted in 1942, and sometimes and his a little more information about him. And then here's his naturalization card, which shows when he came in, which was the second time. Well, actually, that's not even the second time he was. Oh, okay. This is when he was admitted to the Army, 1943. It looks like. Although, wait a minute, he enlisted in 1942. So this looks like an immigration document, and the naturalization card, but it by order of admission, I believe that is when he applied to become a U.S. citizen because he served in the Army. So these are some of the questions that he was asked when he Sorry about this. I got this. Okay, so he's and the place of birth is really effective information, and so on. So here's his interview. It's several minutes long, and if Suzanne, if you could cue it up, that would be great.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
Thank you.
See if I see the one that you sent me for the one for the Angel Island one.
Does it say Eliseo on the? Yeah, it's probably the Angel Island one. Try that one.
Let's see here. That's the only one I've gotten from you, just that one.
Oh, the first one.
Yeah, I didn't get the second one from you.
Okay, hold on a sec. I'll send it again.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like it didn't go out. Okay, yeah, it's on its way.
Okay.
I'm still, growing up without computers and stuff. It's still amazing to me we can do this kind of thing.
I got it. Okay, I'm gonna play
Okay, good.
When I was 7 years old, working on the farm just to help my parents bring up with the world because we were students full there. I was 19 years old. I was to decide that I would PhD. I was so happy and glad and so proud when I heard my father says, well, if you decided, it's up to you. And I said to my father, Dad, give me a chance, I'll do my very best. Whatever the seven, I just get out from the boat. I was the only Filipino in my street that she wandering around down there.
My dad said he wanted to come to Mexico. At that time, Filipino son. He had a brother and uncles that came to the United States, Philippines, that they were doing really well. He was a very motivated young man, willing to do whatever it takes to do well and to help his family back.
Sometimes I let the water running, sometimes I use the sprinkler, but most of the time I just let the water running here. I water to soak into the ground. During the days and the months I've been going from state to other state to make money, I try to save and send money, little money to the people. And so we went to take the Truckee because I like to see my friends too and the family I left behind.
It was almost as if he wanted to go back. Despite the fact that he didn't.
It was a so fortunate that hit me with a nice soap. And then I still working on a new farm. I landed over in Angel Island. And I thought I was going to take over in San Francisco. Oh, but I landed in Angel Island. I was surprised. They've been asking me a lot of questions. They asked me if I had been in the United States. And I said, yes. How long have you been in the United States? It's about 3 years. How did you come here? How did you come here? I don't know, but I paid my bill from the San Francisco. Where are you working at? 645 Lattimore. They look at the record. Yeah, my name is there. So Nothing else they could do. So they told me, okay, you better go back to work. So when I got that, I worked, I think, about 2 3 years to work, no problem.
On the 7th day of December 1941, it struck the 11th hour. Every hour after that will be zero hour.
We were not enlisted. We were drafted. They drafted every swinging Filipino in the whole United States and Canada. The rest of them who wanted to be citizens. And all we had to do is just raise our right and say, I do. And I was one of them.
Artillery opens up on steps are dug in. The last dig strand.
I was with the Canon, I was with the rifle company, I was with communication. It's a double pipe that I put for the English and created the betterment of life, not only in life, but all over the world. Trying to give it up. Oh my good house, although I hate to them old. I like to have a little exercise for myself. And this is one of the main things I enjoy doing. I really don't have it, even now, because I'm this age. But when it comes to see them coming and blowing a ring eye, oh man, I'm just proud of myself. And people come over here and look at it, and they envy it. That makes it better because at least I know somebody appreciates what I've been doing. Forget to let you know how old I am. I can believe it, but I'm already 99 years old.
Okay, I switched over to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Suzanne. I sent you one last video, but while you set that up, I wanted to show the class some of the different things I've used that are pretty simple. There's this audiovisual store in San Francisco that was very helpful. I said, I have a very limited budget, but I want to make my videos look a little bit better. So what should I do? So this is a standard DSLR camera. Got it at Costco, but to fill in some of the lighting, this little light just fits on top of the camera. I'm not going to show it directly in the thing, but it has an adjustment where you can make it lighter or darker, so you won't blind your subject. But it's very helpful. The battery life is pretty amazing, and this is made by a company called ProMaster, and it was like $50, I think. But it's very helpful. And then because the microphones that come in with the cameras aren't often that great either, I said, do I need a lapel mic? Do I have to run something, all the way to the person? And they said, no, just get this directional microphone. It's made by a company called Rode, R-O-D-E, but there's all kinds of them out there. And it just attaches to the bottom of your camera, and you plug it in with the cord into your camera, and it's a directional microphone, so you point it directly at your subject, and the sound quality will be a lot better than if it just came from the camera itself. So they're just two little things. I didn't want to get too technical with this workshop, but just in case you wanted to make your videos look a little bit better for posterity, you could do that. And there's all kinds of different editing software that's out there. Were you able to get the last video, Suzanne?
Hold on, let me see if I can pull it up right now.
Okay, thanks. And I'm showing this last video because it's very multi-generational. It's a young man named Casey Chow, and when he starts trying to find out about his grandfather's story, he finds a lot more about his mother and his uncle and other people in the family. And it was a project done called Three People, which was a project of the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. It's not necessarily people who came through the island, but it was trying to get young people to understand their families' immigrant experiences. And so Casey was one of the people doing the project, but then he realized, oh, well, we're looking for people to interview, for the young people to interview. I'd like to talk to my own family member as well. And they trained the young people to do the interviews, to do the lighting, to do the sound, and the final products were all shared on the foundation's YouTube website, and has been a great educational opportunity for the foundation to share these folks' experiences with other people. There are like 6 different folks who were interviewed, and if it's ready, Suzanne, if you could cue it up. I think it's about 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay, I'm starting it right now.
Thank you.
There it is. I'm going to start it over again.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Casey. That's me. This guy right here. Family doesn't tell me much about our history. When I heard about this project, I got excited to document it. With my grandpa getting older and his declining health, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to hear his story.
51我喺人講佢大國係啊，唔知喺邊度，我有咩都唔識。第三個咁喺有波士多數係美國人，仲講人多好或者唔好。我講出嚟。波士出嚟，去生意官，咁我咪有咪冇去做，我咪做工咯。咪想揾錢咯，我計劃揾想揾錢又。
Well, I feel probably that he was very fortunate because I don't know if he had a lot of true hardships, like you mentioned, if people either going to Ellis Island. He was fortunate to kind of go to this facility for a few weeks, and he's out and he's working, and having my grandfather be here and also help him. So he kind of was lucky in a sense to be here in America.
I never knew he immigrated from Boston. He later talked about leaving the laundromat and moving to the West Coast with my great-grandfather, where he worked as a store clerk at a grocery store. He didn't say much about his job, but he had a specific memory of his time there.
一堂 much food， 咁我日啱大風，同埋大師去睇學，嗰時問我，要一路睇劇咧，你去嘛講我話我去啦，或者去咯，呢件事。好多，可能唔使。個打俾我唔，而家話喺呢度。
He did mention that Lucy would have died in the plane accident in March 1st, whatever year. We wouldn't be here. Number one, I wouldn't be in this country. And he would be born, and Casey would be here.
I would never have been born. I would have been in America. I don't think about it. I never knew my mom's story.
For me, I'm very upset to come to this country because I have a lot of friends and I don't really want to come. Everything is small in here, so I was very, very disappointed. But because my mom really anxious to come to meet my father, so I just come along. But I was very, very because I never lived with a father. So to me, I get used to just me and my mom for 15 years. But when I first come over here, when I see a stranger, even though I saw his picture, but he's different from the picture. So to me, I kind of think, are you sure? But it's okay. I kind of slowly take me a while to accept.
Wow. Never knew she grew up without a father. To discover my grandpa's story, I found something more. I never realized what my mom left behind to be here. I was fortunate enough to grow up with both my dad and my mom. Not even realize what she had to go through. I take her for granted all the time. Don't think of it. My grandfather left my grandmother and my mom. I never saw them for 16 years so that my family would have. I don't know if I'd be able to do that.
Family, Vila, and Candy, and you, and Melanie, and Nelson, everybody come together.
It makes you happy when we're all together?
Yeah, together. Thank you.
Really? Do anything, right?
Okay, we're back to you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Suzanne. Um, as you can see, oral histories can be a lot more than just, you know, documenting things. It can really big impact on the family and a lot of understanding by the younger generation of what the older generation did or is doing. And so I think for a lot of us, it can become really a fantastic experience. I'm going to go back and share a little bit more. So this is a kind of an example of research that was continued through oral history. We have this family picture, and we're all trying to figure out who these people are. Who are these women, and who are the babies? And no one seemed to know. I wrote to China to an uncle there and never got a response. I asked older folks, but there was no one older than my parents' generation. And so I was wondering, would I ever find out this information? And were they my grandfather's sisters? Where was this taken and things like that. So our family, the Din family, always has a bowling tournament in Sacramento every New Year's time. And my cousin Cameron once said, "Hey, you want to go meet our cousin from China?" I go, "What?" They know I love to do family research, and they say, "Yeah, he's been here for 25 years." I go, "What? 25 years?" And he works at the Rayleigh supermarket, which was like across the street from the bowling alley. And I said, "Of course I want to talk to Howie. What's his story?" And so we went to the meat department, and that's where he worked. And so just talking with him, and I happened to, I knew I was going to meet with him, so I brought photographs and things like that. And so he said, "Oh yeah, I think my mom knows about this picture. Oh, this is a group of us who went to see Howie. Howie's in the middle with the Rayleigh's tag on, and my cousin Janet and Cameron. And so we went over there and we were talking for a while. And he was took a break and he said, "Well, yeah, let me check about." Let me talk to my mom. She might know who these are. And his mom is, like a distant cousin of mine. Howie's like my second cousin. That's pretty close, right? Maybe third, maybe third. So we're talking, and then he talks to his mom, and then he doesn't do email. So I was talking to him on the phone, and he came up with all these people and how they were all related. And then we went back and got the family tree out and found out where they all fit, and I could, add all kinds of new people to the family tree. Most of them are in China, and it turns out this picture was taken in Vietnam. I said, really, the family spent some time there in, I believe, the 30s when everyone else had come to the U.S. And so, it's just by talking to him and him talking to his mom, I was able to find out a whole lot more information. And so that's the end of the formal talk. I'm assuming a lot of you will have questions, and so I think that's all. Yeah, that's all I have formally. But I would love to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Grant, I'm going to go ahead and bring the lights up.
Okay.
You can see everybody.
Questions? I'm going to turn on the chat too. So if you rather just send a question by chat, I'll look for it.
Any questions? Okay, Randall?
Well, no, I just had a point. On the computers, on the chat, you're supposed to put your name in there, but that's not done because I don't know where anybody's sitting. So there's just A, B, C, and D in that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, you know what? I have a question. Actually, I kind of want to share something with you, Grant. At the same time, I'm sharing it with our class.
Great.
Did you want to talk a little bit about StoryCourse and kind of like do a segue for me into StoryCourse?
I'm familiar with it, but I know it's a project. But why don't you fill in more since you've got the facility over there?
Okay. Let me know when you can see me on the camera.
Okay, there. Got you now.
Okay. All right. So what we do, if for you who've been coming, for all of you, we've been talking about starting a StoryCourse project now we've been working. And we finally have it up and running. And every one of you can do it if you'd like it. Now, you can do it on your cell phone. We've talked about that. All you have to do is just go down to your app store and download the StoryCourse app. And you can record up to, I believe it's, we're kind of limiting it to like about 20 minutes. But I think you can actually do it up to 30 minutes on the StoryCourse website. And what you do is it turns your phone into a tape recorder. You don't have to download the tape recorder because the StoryCourse app actually turns your cell phone into a tape recorder. And you can sit there and interview your older relatives or your younger relatives or your same age relatives. It doesn't matter, your friends, whatever. And when you're done with it, it asks you to take a photograph with your cell phone of you and the person you're interviewing. And then what you do is you submit it. If you're going to use the app, you submit it directly to StoryCourse, and it goes into what's called StoryCourse Archives. And that is actually stored by the Library of Congress, and it will be there forever and ever. So if you now it's unlike Grant's presentation with videos of oral history recording. With StoryCourse, it's only oral history. So in other words, it's an audio recording. It's not a video recording. It's an audio recording because you're using a tape recorder. So what our school has started, we kind of modeled our program after another library's program. And what we have in here is hold on one second. We have, I open this up, a tape recorder. And you can check this out and go into one of our study rooms downstairs with the person you're going to interview. And you can close the door, and it's not soundproof, but it's a pretty good sound room. And you just simply, and we have instructions right here. Very, very easy to follow. I mean, we actually did focus groups on this with students, trying to make sure that literally anyone can use this with the instructions. I mean, we spent months refining this over and over and over again to make sure that it was so easy. And it shows you on this little diagram right here how to use the recorder. And it comes with a memory chip inside of it. And you sit down and record it, and we have inside the kit a tripod, so you can set the tape recorder up on the table, so it's not like laying down on the table cycling the sound. And you just simply screw it in, and you use the tripod, and you put it on the table, and you put it in between you and the person you're interviewing, and it records. As you can see, it has 2 recording apparatuses right there. And literally, it's a very high quality sound. I mean, we really did a lot of experimenting with tape recorders before we decided to buy. And what we also have in the kit is, because, as I think Grant mentioned, when you're doing a interview and you have limited time, or whether, like the example he used on his camera, it was limited to 20 minutes. Well, with our kit here, it's limited to 30 minutes. And so how do you keep time, without like interview, actually like doing this all the time during your interview and upsetting the person you're interviewing? So we have cue cards. And what we recommend when you do an interview with somebody is bring in a timekeeper, a third person who does not participate in the interview. And the sole job of the timekeeper is to keep an eye on the time. So we have a timer right here that once you start recording, you set it to 30 minutes. And the timekeeper, not you and the person you're interviewing, are paying attention to time. The timekeeper is paying attention to time. And so what the timekeeper does is use the cue cards, letting both people know how much time you have left. So that way, you don't have to interrupt the oral history interview. You want to keep that flow going. Once you get it started, you never know what someone's going to say in the interview, so you don't want to interrupt them. So we, pretty much, like I said, we did focus groups on this and all kinds of stuff, and we tested it with students, and we just really, 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 came up with every case that we can consider possible. And same thing, once here, these little flip cards show you how to put batteries in it. It's, how to plug it into the plug and the wall. I mean, literally, we just did everything to make it so easy to do this recording. And then when you're done with the recording, you simply take the machine and everything that was in the bag back to the circulation desk, and they give it to one person in our library. Her name is Izumi. I don't know if you all know Izumi. But she will take this and take the file off the recorder, off the chip, and she will, on her computer, convert it into a DVD. She will give you the DVD. It may not be the same day. You might have to come back depending on the workload for that day. But you might come back, and she will give you for free a copy of that DVD. And what she's going to ask you to do, and this is completely up to you. You don't have to do it. But if you'd like to put it on the TMCC StoryCorps website, we actually have our own, I don't want to say YouTube channel. It's a StoryCorps channel on their StoryCorps archive website, and you can download that onto it. And then you let us know how you want it set. If you want it set just to only people who are members of the TMCC StoryCorps archive community can listen to it, or we can set it so everybody in the whole wide world can listen. It's completely up to you. We have a permission form, and you tell us, what degree of access you want everyone to have. Now, obviously, like I've said so many times in this class before, the idea of doing family history is to share it and preserve it, right? So, my recommendation would be, if you're going to record an oral history, open it up for the whole world to hear, because, when it's stored in the Library of Congress archives, 500 years from now, if someone's researching your family line, if they don't have permission, they're never going to hear it. It'll be there, but nobody will be able to listen to it. So the idea of recording your family history is to make sure that everybody, for generations and generations to come, can enjoy and learn from that story. So, we've done, a really great job here, and I hope that all of you, if you want to do, the app on your phone at home and, interview your relatives wherever they are at, whether you go visit them in New York or Iowa or whatever the case. But if you have somebody local and you want to do it, this is a great way of doing it. And like I said, for free, we'll give you a DVD. And you can share that DVD. It's just an MP3 or an MP4 file. And you can share it online with your relatives or friends or, and you can do relatives, you can do friends. I think Grant brought up a thing earlier in his presentation about using the FAM method, family, friends, and neighbors. His story, one of his videos brought to mind a situation. About a year ago, a girlfriend of mine that I grew up with, that I've known since I was 10 years old, but when we were 18, she moved to Iowa and started a family, and she's lived her whole life there. And her and I only see each other now, maybe every 15 years or so. And she came to visit me a couple of years ago, and I'm still in Southern California. And what did we do? We decided to play, nostalgia. So we went back to our junior high, and which has now been converted to something completely different than a junior high. But we just walked through the school, reminiscing about, all the times we spent at the school back in the 1960s. And I just was thinking to myself, my God, I wish I had a tape recorder, or a videotape, with me that day, because, she may never come back again, or, we may never have the opportunity to go back to our junior high school ever again together and reminisce. So, if you have that moment with a friend or a relative, or somebody you grew up with, doesn't have to be a relative, capture that moment and put it on StoryCorps, because it doesn't have to be just about genealogy. It can be about anything. In fact, one of our teachers is using StoryCorps this semester as a homework assignment, and she's letting her students record anything they want, as long as it's just an oral history interview. It could be with a friend, it could be with a neighbor, it could be, it could be about, you can even have somebody interview you. It doesn't have to be you interviewing somebody else. Somebody can interview you. Just because, we've all been busy for years and years capturing our ancestors' stories, but what about your stories? Your stories are just as important to preserve today. So, if you want to have somebody come in and interview you, please do, because don't put off your history, before it's too late, because we're so busy working on our ancestors' history. Every one of you has a story that's worth preserving. So, if this is something you're interested in, all you have to do is go down to the circulation desk, and you're going to have to check this out using your TMCC library card, and this is for in-library use only. You cannot take it home. And you can just go ahead and go into one of the rooms with the person you're interviewing. And if you need help setting it all up, just let me know, and I'll go through the circulation desk with you and get it all set up. And, I think you're going to have a really, really rewarding experience. So with that, Grant, did you hear all that? I don't know if you heard all that.
I did. That's great. It's really terrific.
I don't know if you can you see the kit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we got the instructions. We got the time clock right there. We've got the cue cards. We've got the instructions on everything's laminated, so it can be used over and over and over again. And that's all you have to do. And Grant, just for your information, we actually modeled our StoryCorps program here on campus after another library. We actually had a guest speaker in my class about a year and a half ago, and she was telling us about her StoryCorps project. And I went, whoa, stop right there. I want to know more about your program. And so she actually sent me one of her kits on a loan, and we modeled our kit after her kit. So, it's a wonderful thing. It's free. It doesn't cost a penny. Whether you use the StoryCorps app on your phone, or whether you use our little bag right here and take it home on a DVD, it's all free. That's what we want you to do. We want you to use it. We want you to preserve your family history, or just the history of you. It's all worth preserving. And like I said, if you want to put it on the TMCC StoryCorps webpage, let us know and we'll put it on. If you don't want us to, you just want to share it with relatives, that's fine too. But there is a permission form if you're going to use our kit. If you use your app, you don't have to sign a permission form with us. You have to sign it with them online. But it's just holding everyone non-liable, for anything that's said during a recording, because you never know what people are going to say. But anyhow, so if you're interested, just go downstairs. If you want me to meet you down there at the same time you're going to be here, I'll make sure I'm here to help you walk through it. It doesn't have to be on Fridays either. You can do this Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday.
What was the spelling of that? Story, C-O?
RPS,
RPS.
StoryCorps. I just put it on. Yeah, and I've had it downloaded on my phone for several years now, and I have done several recordings, and once again, if your cell phone is halfway decent, and you don't have a lot of background noise, it captures it pretty well. So, and it's really easy to use. The app is super, super easy. And you can create like little files, with like if you want just your dad's side of the family in this file, and your mom's side of the family in that file. It's really user friendly. Yeah.
If you want to do card?
No, it has nothing to do with the card. It has to do with the storage capacity on the StoryCorps website. They only allow 30 minutes.
Okay.
But you can do more than one. Like you can do, if let's say you want to interview your aunt and you talk for 6 hours, just divide it into 30-minute increments and then just upload it all on StoryCorps app. Or if you want it, like I said, you can do it over and we'll just put it on a CD and give it to you. You can take it home with you. So easy. No reason not to, right? It's just so easy. So, okay, so questions for Grant. You got questions for Grant?
I'd like to ask a question. I'm not familiar with the Angel Island Association or the foundation that you have.
Yes.
Are they doing something similar to like what Ellis Island is, that you can go there and walk through and, get records or things like that?
They have some of what Ellis Island does. They have, you can go to Angel Island. I really recommend it. It's a state park, and if you go to AIISF, S as in Sam, F as in Frank.org, they have information on the history, and they have a link that says visit the park and so on. They have ferries from San Francisco and Tiburon you can take to go tour the barracks, and you can see the things that were in the video that Lai King had. You can actually see recreated bunks, 3 high bunks where to show where people stayed, and they have really knowledgeable volunteer docents as well as the staff who are there to fill you in. What they don't have is records, unlike Ellis Island, where you can go to Ellis Island and go to their genealogy site and center, and they could look your family up. Angel Island doesn't have that yet. They do have access to Ancestry.com, where people can look online and look for family information on their site. But the site that does have it, the location that does have it, is the National Archives in San Bruno, where they have many records of, I think almost 100,000 records of people from 80 different countries who came through Angel Island, not just the Chinese, and also people from Asia, but we have had stories on Jews from Russia, from Austria, people escaping the Holocaust, and who all came through Angel Island at one time or another. So if you go to the island, the guides can talk to you about that. There's this one story that I love to share, because we had some researchers go down to San Bruno, and they were going through files. They found one file, which was, the files are arranged in case number order. So if you know the ship they're on, generally they can help find it. Or even if you don't know, you can contact the archives. I really recommend contacting them ahead of time if you think your family might have come through Angel Island. If you find on Ancestry or Family Search or somewhere a ship record of somebody coming into San Francisco at a certain time, there's a chance that they came through Angel Island. So we did this research on people on this boat of Jewish refugees, and there's one story that really attracted the eye of the researcher, where it was a woman named Rosa Ginsburg, and she was, on her way to, she came to the U.S. from Shanghai because her family had escaped Austria, traveled to the Jewish compound in Shanghai, and then she got kind of wanderlust and decided, I'm going to America. And so when she was questioned, and all these questions are on file at the archives, she was asked, Ms. Ginsburg, why are you here? And she said, I'm here to get married. Oh, where's your husband? Where's your fiance? He's in New York City. Oh, what's his name? And Herbert Klein, and all these questions. And then they contacted the folks at Ellis Island, or affiliated with the Immigration Service in New York, and they asked Herbert to come in for some questions, and they said, well, are you engaged to Rosa? Well, I don't have any money now. I'm just working in this like orphans home. I think that's where he worked, and but we're good friends, and do you have money to send for her to come cross country? And he said, no, I don't have any money. So they went back to Rosa, and they said, well, Herbert said you're really not engaged, and he doesn't have any money. So what's the deal? And she said, well, you can say anything on paper. We're really good friends. She didn't, she was under oath. He was under oath. They didn't want to say, well, we are, but really not. So they said, well, we can't send you to New York because you're likely to become a public charge. You have no money. So what, do you have family members who can pay for your travel? And so she wrote to family in Chicago and New York, and they finally sent money enough for travel, including some spending money, like $100. And so the story ended and said, well, the authorities said she was, very upright young woman. She seemed very capable. And so releasing her. So we said at the end of the story, if anyone knows what happened to Herbert and or Rosa, what happened to Rosa and or Herbert, let us know. So maybe a year passed, and then we get this call or an email from this man named Jeffrey Klein, and he goes, "How did you find out about my grandmother?" Well, we had these files in the National Archives. Because, Herbert and Rosa got married. And we go, really? So he came to visit. He was from Las Vegas, and he came to visit with his wife, and then his daughter, who was a cantor at a synagogue on the peninsula, and they came to visit, and he brought out Rosa's passport with stamps from the Chinese consulate in Vienna, because he was like Schindler. He was issuing exit visas for Jews who were escaping the Nazis to leave, and he had all those documents. And in the passport was stamped they had sailed out of Trieste, and then I think it was Trieste, and gone to Sri Lanka, then called Ceylon, and made their way to Shanghai, and that she had actually, when she went to New York, she was friends with Herbert, but they weren't engaged. But Herbert was there, so she stayed with her aunt and uncle for a while, and then got to know Herbert and decided, well, let's get married. And so they did, and then that's like a postscript to our story, and that's a long way of answering your question. That we do. There are documents in San Bruno that do trace a number of immigrants through Angel Island at the time, just like there are elsewhere in the archives, depending on the port. But most of the case files are kept at San Bruno, and also what are called the A files, which are the A for alien, which are records of naturalization, and also anyone born, anyone in 1940 was supposed to go register with the Immigration Service, and so a lot of those files exist. And there was talk of destroying all these records, but there was a group called Save Our National Archives, which fortunately called for them to be saved. The ones for the people who came through San Francisco, mostly Chinese immigrants, are being released are being moved to San Bruno and released to the public. The rest of them are in, I understand, some caves for safekeeping in the Kansas City area, and you can request those. They have a very good index on the National Archives website where you can search for a lot of these files. But I do recommend, if you're in the Bay Area, to go. The immigration station is not open on Monday and Tuesday, but it's open every other day of the week. There are maybe 3 ferries a day from San Francisco you can take, and on the weekends there are several from Tiburon. During the winter there are no weekday regularly scheduled ferries from Tiburon because there's not a lot of demand, but a lot of school kids do go, so they do have sometimes they have custom or charter runs from Tiburon. It's only like a 15-minute ride from Tiburon, but it's like you're in another kind of a whole nother world, because you're on an island, and it's a lot different world. But when you're there, you really get a sense of what the immigrants went through.
Grant, let me ask the class, how many of you were here when Angel Island did a tour for us?
Oh,
great. Only 2 people, three people. Todd, what was it, about a year and a half ago, I think. We had Angel Island, because we were downstairs, I think, when we did it. And we actually had a park ranger from Angel Island and take his tablet. They had a Wi-Fi access all over the island. Right. And he took his tablet and he literally walked us all over the island, taking us from station to station to station to station. And we also have on our book cart, because in order to prepare for that presentation, I bought a book on the history of Angel Island, and I believe it's on the cart today. So if you're interested in Angel Island, I encourage you to check that book out and take it home. And if you are interested, I can go back in my archives and see. I don't know whether we recorded it that day or not. It's always up to the speaker to give us permission or not to record. And Grant was wonderful to give me permission to record today, so it's all being recorded, everything that happened today. But anyhow, if I do have that Angel Island presentation, I'm more than happy to share the link with you. Just let me know if you're interested, and I'll go back and see if I can't find that link. But Angel Island, although I've not ever been there in person, that walking tour that he gave us using his tablet, the camera on his tablet, was wonderful. We saw everything just like as if we were there, and he answered everyone's questions. Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So yeah, the next time I do go to San Francisco, I do plan on going to Angel Island.
Yeah.
I do as well.
Oh, good. Let me know, Suzanne. Was that John Claggett who spoke to you?
You know,
That
it was
might
about a year and a half ago, so I'm sorry I
Yeah.
don't remember his name, but he was so accommodating, and bless his heart, like I said, he walked all over that island tablet and just showed us everything. I mean, literally, we were walking along with him on the paths. It was wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
It was a park ranger, yeah. Yeah, it was a young man. I remember that, but I don't remember his name. But he was
Okay.
very, very nice. Very,
Yeah,
very
there's a program of the parks called the Ports Park Online Resources for Teachers and Students. And that's probably what you were part of, because they have a cart with, like you say, a camera and all that stuff that he can walk all around the island.
Okay, more questions for Grant? Yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering real quickly, what were the
Did you hear the question, Grant?
No, I didn't.
What years of operation was Angel Island in? What was the time period?
1910 to 1940. Before then, there was an immigration shack in San Francisco, and then after that, they moved it back to San Francisco. But the administration building burned down in 1940, electrical fire, and so because of that, they moved everything off-site.
Another question?
Probably during that, maybe some issues.
Did you hear the question, Grant?
No, sorry, Suzanne, I couldn't hear
That's
any
okay.
of
I'll
it.
repeat it. She has some friends that she's meeting with tomorrow that are from China, and she thinks their family may have come through Angel Island, and she was wondering if you ever worked directly with people to help them with their ancestry through Angel Island.
Yeah, I'd love to help out and point them in the right direction. And they feel free to email me. Suzanne has my address, and I can see we have a database of about 90,000 records, and we could look on there. Often it's hard because the records are many people have the same name, but we could try to get started and then send that person to the archives to see if they might have the file. Do you know when they came to the U.S.?
She's not sure.
Okay.
He's in his 80s right now, currently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a very good chance. And even if he didn't, for about the several years afterwards, there are still records of people coming through. Yeah, if he came through during those years, there's a good chance. And then if you can take him out there, it could be really amazing. A lot of former detainees would can remember, I slept in this bunk, I was in this room, things like that. The thing about Angel Island is that when people came through, because the authorities wanted to verify that they really were the children of who they said they were, who were the people who are legally here, they would ask all kinds of questions. And in my grandmother's file, I've counted, I think, almost 200 questions about the village, the neighborhood where she shopped, what the house was like, and about that many, even more questions of my grandfather. And so a lot of people came as what they call paper sons or daughters, and so that information might not necessarily be the accurate information about their village, but if you think that it is the correct information, you will find a lot of great information about their where they came from and what village and things like that. And so if he did come through and you can find that file, you might be able to see, does this all sound familiar, or are these your questions, and it could be really an amazing experience. We went with a man who had come through the island and brought a video and looked through his file once, and it was really a fantastic experience for him and for us.
You got another question?
I do, and I'm hearing what you said. How familiar with these interviewers? I guess the immigration officials to ask 200 questions about a village somewhere where they people that had been former immigrants that were doing the interviews, or how did that work?
Yeah, I actually could hear that question. Generally, they would just have a list of the kinds of questions they would ask, and they compared the answers with not only the parents, but with other villagers who had come through. So they'd ask all these questions, and they diagram like who lived in which row of the village. They asked like who lived in the third house on the fourth row of your village, and then what kind of feet did she have, because some women still had bound feet at that time, unfortunately. And so they sometimes compare those answers with other people from that same village. And so it was incredible the amount of documentation that the authorities kept on these questions.
Do you have time to talk a little bit about the Angel Island poetry? Because I know the park ranger talked a lot about that, but since so few people in the class today were here back then.
Sure. Because when people were questioned, they would often, let's say they answered all the questions and 95% were correct, but then they said, well, there was a few. We're not sure if he's really the son of so-and-so, so we're going to reject his application. So the people would hire these attorneys in San Francisco, and they'd appeal their cases. So while they were on appeal, they would have to stay on the island, and sometimes but the average length of stay was about 3 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks according to researchers. But some people would be released earlier, quicker, especially if they're second class on the ship, or first class or second class, they would be deemed to have more money. But then sometimes people would be detained for months. We have many case files where people were kept for months, and even the longest stay on record was about 2 years, and that person was deported. So when they were there, they would be bored. And so it turns out a lot of these immigrants were fairly well educated. They would write these beautiful poems in classical style, lamenting their being kept on the island. And in China, people did not live in wooden houses. And so Angel Island Immigration Station, the barracks building, was made out of wood. And so they would talk about, I'm kept like a chicken in this house made of wood, or they would talk about the barbarians who are keeping us here, or I miss my family, or I can see, all kinds of poetry. And I'm hoping there's some in the book that you have, Suzanne. I'm sure there are. There's a couple books about Angel Island that are really informative. And so most of the poems were, painted over time. And then, so when the immigration station closed in 1940, when the barracks were still standing after the administration building burned down, the building just kind of sat there for a long time. And then Angel Island finally became a state park in the 60s, I think early 60s, when the federal government gave it up. And it was just sitting there, and the master plan was to tear down all the buildings and create a I think it was a campsite or a picnic area. And fortunately, a man named Alexander Weiss, who was a park ranger at the time, but he himself was an immigrant or a refugee from Austria, where his family had fled in the 40s to escape the Nazis. And he had been a freedom rider in the South. So he had a very strong strong principles. And so when he discovered the writing on the walls, he also happened to be a student at San Francisco State University after the Third World Student Strikes, which resulted in ethnic studies. And so there were some professors there that he could say, hey, I work on Angel Island, and I see all this Chinese writing on the walls. What's it all about? And they said, really? And the teachers there didn't really know much about it. No one knew much about it because, as Lai King said in an interview, no one talked about Angel Island. And so Alex brought some of the professors out to the island and started searching. Some of the professors found, my mother was on the island, and they started a movement to document all the photographs, all the poetry. Most of them are kind of faint because they were painted over many times, but a couple of them are really distinct, And so those are the ones that kind of saved the island, because they could bring people out to the island and say, look at what people wrote. And the poetry talks about, oh, because of this these laws that keep me here and things like that. And so there's like hundreds of poems, and there's a book called Island that documents the poetry as well as has oral histories. No one has ever come forward to say that he or had carved these poetry, but we have the stories of the people who were there at the time. The women were kept in the administration building second floor because it was so crowded in the men's barracks. They moved the women to the administration building. I understand there were poems that the women carved also, but unfortunately when that building burned down, it destroyed what was left. And so we'll never know. There's also a hospital, and that's going to be turned into what's called the Pacific Coast Immigration Center. And September 26th of this year, they will reopen the hospital, which will become like a museum, just as Ellis Island tries to tell all the immigration story, not just for people who came through Ellis Island. The new facility on Angel Island will talk all about West Coast immigration, and it'll be a great place to go. So if you're in the Bay Area September 26th, that's a great time to go to the island, because there'll be a lot of programs and probably performances as well. So like I said, the poems are probably what preserve the building. There's many in every possible part. There's a scholar named Judy Young, and who's documented a lot with other people. There's also a man named Charlie Egan who teaches at San Francisco State, and he's found more markings on the wall, not just poetry, but like Japanese. It was used to house Japanese prisoners of war during World War II. He's also found Russian names, and he's amazing. Charlie has traced the names. Some people carve their names on the wall. None of the Chinese put their names on them, but there were Russians and Japanese who carved or wrote their names on the wall. And he was able to, using immigration documents or ship records, trace the descendants of these folks. And he was able to get a whole family of Japanese descendants, a Russian, two Russian families. He's brought them out to the island to show what their ancestors had written on the walls. It's just amazing. There's one, the Feinbergs from Russia wrote one brother came through first, and then his brother came later. So the first one almost wrote it like, "Hey brother, I know you're coming through here. Well, I was here." So he wrote the date he was here, like Christmas 1912 or something like that, and then that he was here, and that carving is still there over 100 years later, which is really amazing. So there's a whole lot of, it's a genealogist's dream just to go there and visit.
Yeah, it was a great presentation, and I hope I did record it.
I hope so.
In fact, if I could find the recording, if you're interested, I'll be more than happy to send you a grant if that's something you're interested in. I mean,
yeah, sure.
Out there, so it's probably nothing you haven't already seen, but I thought it was a great example of using technology to take the park to somebody in a different part of the country without having to leave.
Yeah, the foundation, I'll send it to the foundation, and they would probably put it on their YouTube channel or their or possibly their Facebook page. But yeah, the folks at the island have talked to people all around the country, even in foreign countries, talking about Angel Island. And like you say, it's you can really see everything in the immigration station, right? You saw the poetry and everything else, I guess, I assume.
Okay, and Todd, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
John Clyde is like I was saying.
Oh, John Cleggett, one of the students who's been coming a long time. He's the one who did the presentation for us.
Yeah, John's the they call them interpreters. Because the ones with guns are rangers, but he's an interpreter who does a lot of the port's presentations. Also his colleague Casey Dexter Lee, who's been on the island for about 15 years. The staff actually live on the island, and so they really get to know it well. But yeah, John gives a really good tour of the whole facility. I'm glad you remembered his name. I'm hoping to go out there in a month or so, and I'll tell him that he had a great impact in Reno.
Todd, do you know whether we recorded that session? 2018? Okay. I'll go back and look. Thank you for letting me know the date. That'll really help me from going through tons and tons and tons of old records. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
great. Okay, any other questions for Grant? Okay, let's give him a big hand, shall we?
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
We thank you very, very much for your time and such a wonderful presentation, and I'll be in touch with you soon with the link to the streaming video.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Good luck with all your work, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.